Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spry English. I'm Emmy, and today we're going on a deep dive into our episode talking about free time. And this time, I'm not alone. Let me introduce our deep dive hosts, Lucy and Mark. In this deep dive, we'll look more closely at the words, phrases, and expressions from the main episode. We'll also practice listening, pronunciation, and useful everyday English. And don't worry, everything is simple, clear, and perfect for English learners. So get comfortable, listen carefully, and let's dive in. And let's have some fun with English. And if you enjoy learning English with Spry English, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, what do you like to do in your free time?
So when you sit down to learn a new language, the expectation is almost always that it's going to be this punishing grind. You picture rigid textbooks, endless verb conjugations, and just drilling flashcards until your eyes cross.
Right. It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Exactly. It feels like a steep, grueling mountain that you are forced to climb just to, order a cup of coffee on vacation.
Yeah, because the framing is usually entirely focused on endurance, right, and data acquisition. I mean, educational models often treat the learner like a human hard drive.
Yeah, just upload the vocabulary.
Right, just demanding you upload enough vocabulary and grammar rules to pass a test. It is highly structured, and the pressure to perform is just constant.
But imagine if learning a language wasn't a mountain to climb, but rather like trying on a new pair of glasses. You aren't simply swapping out the words you use to label the world around you. You're actually subtly changing what you focus on.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Thanks. I mean, a new language shifts your perspective entirely.
It does. And that shift in focus alters the landscape of how you think, how you process information, and ultimately how you interact with your environment. Because the words you choose to learn first, well, they create the foundation for how you'll experience that new culture.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to look through a very specific and surprisingly profound pair of glasses. We have the transcript of a unique English learning lesson from the YouTube channel Spry English.
Right, the free time lesson.
Yeah, the title is simply, What Do You Do in Free Time? And on the surface, it features a student named Kevin, two highly opinionated pets, and a short story. So, it looks like standard beginner-level vocabulary.
It really does look basic at first glance.
Yeah.
But the deeper you analyze this material, the faster you realize it's a masterclass in how language shapes mindset.
It's wild, honestly.
It uses humor and narrative to teach a really complex philosophy about leisure, kindness, and even cognitive psychology, all disguised as an introductory English class.
So, whether you are currently trying to pick up a new language, whether you teach one, or if you are simply a person trying to figure out how to spend your weekends without feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt, there is a surprising amount of wisdom hidden in this simple lesson.
Absolutely. And the brilliance of this lesson begins before any actual vocabulary is introduced.
Right.
The teacher starts with a foundational prompt for the student, Kevin. The scenario is you suddenly have one free day. No work, no study, no phone notifications. What do you do first?
A dream scenario for most of us.
Seriously. And Kevin answers without hesitation, sleep, of course.
Which, most adults functioning in the modern world would have that exact impulse. But Kevin instantly second-guesses himself. He asks the teacher, wait, am I a bad student?
He's expecting a lecture.
Right. He fully expects to be scolded for giving such a lazy, unproductive answer. But the lesson surprises him, and us, by validating him completely. It explicitly states, free time is not about being busy, it's about being happy.
Which is such a refreshing take.
It is. It defines free time simply as the period when you don't work and don't study. And it categorizes sleeping and relaxing at home as self-care, putting them on the exact same level as drinking tea or coffee.
Which is so important when you consider the modern pressure you face every day. I mean, we exist in a culture of constant optimization.
Everything has to be productive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your hobbies are expected to be impressive. Jogging isn't enough. You should be training for a marathon.
Right.
Baking bread needs to become an artisanal side hustle. The lesson recognizes this cultural exhaustion and immediately attacks it.
I do have to challenge the logic of the source material here, though. I mean, an educational lesson is, by definition, something that demands effort and attention and, mental strain.
Sure.
So actively championing doing absolutely nothing feels counterintuitive for a teacher. You'd think the goal is to get the student fired up, ambitious, working hard.
Well, from a pedagogical standpoint, validating rest is actually a highly calculated strategy.
Hmm.
In language acquisition, there is this concept known as the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Yeah, think of it as an invisible wall in your brain,
Mhm.
constructed entirely out of anxiety, stress, and self-doubt. When that wall is high, the brain is in a defensive state, and no new information can get in.
Oh, that makes total sense. Like,
Still,
think about a time you sat down for a test you were stressed about. You know the material, but because your anxiety is spiking, your mind just goes totally blank.
exactly.
Your affective filter is blocking your access to the knowledge.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So by validating sleep and telling Kevin he is not a bad student for wanting to rest, the lessons systematically dismantles that wall. It lowers the learner's anxiety.
Ah,
The source text explicitly promises no pressure, and this is the psychological mechanism delivering on that promise.
so by removing the pressure to have an impressive, productive hobby, the lesson creates a stress-free environment. That makes your brain far more receptive to learning.
Yes.
When you aren't silently judging yourself for your lack of interesting weekend plans, you can easily absorb the simple phrases the lesson starts to introduce, like, I relax at home or I listen to music.
Because the curriculum recognizes that you cannot teach cognitive skills to a brain stuck in survival mode. Creating psychological safety is step one.
Right.
Once that anxiety wall is out of the way, the brain is primed to absorb new words.
And then the lesson provides a pretty comprehensive list of hobbies. We see things grouped together, reading, cooking, drawing, photography, learning English. And then it moves into active free time, grouping sports like football, yoga, walking, going to the gym, swimming.
Notice how the lesson groups those activities, though. By clustering the quiet, solitary hobbies first and then moving to the active physical ones, the lesson is using semantic mapping.
Okay, what does that do for the learner?
It helps the learner build mental folders. It prevents cognitive overload because you aren't just learning a random assortment of words. You are learning categories of human experience.
But even presenting a perfectly organized list of human experiences is still going to put someone to sleep, if that's all there is to it. So to fix the boredom issue, the lesson introduces its two-star characters, and they aren't human. We meet Sunny the dog and Lily the cat.
I love them.
They're great. Sunny's hobbies are eating, sleeping, and watching animal movies. The lesson shares his inner monologue during free time, which is exclusively, oh, human is home.
That's just perfect dog logic.
And then there is Lily the cat, whose main hobby is watching everyone and judging. The text actually notes she only watches herself in the mirror.
Classic cat.
Yeah. Later, during the mini-quiz section, the lesson states that Sunny enjoyed the experience but learned nothing, while Lily judged us silently.
It's so funny.
It is, but I noticed the source completely avoided human dialogue for these hobby sections. Using a cat who stares in the mirror is hilarious, but from a teaching perspective, does absurdity actually help you memorize things better than realistic dialogue?
That's a great question.
Because if I'm learning English to speak to humans, shouldn't I be practicing with a generic conversation between two people talking about their gym routines?
Well, realistic dialogue often triggers the exact performance anxiety we just talked about. If you listen to two humans discussing their weekend plans, you subconsciously compare yourself to them.
Oh, I see.
Or you worry about having to replicate that exact nuanced conversation in the real world.
Yeah.
Absurdity bypasses that pressure. Lily's vanity and Sunny's simple joys provide emotional anchors.
Right.
Strong emotions, even amusement, release dopamine, which actually enhances memory consolidation.
So it's like the difference between practicing a sport with a strict coach versus playing around in the backyard with a younger sibling.
Exactly that.
The strict coach represents realistic dialogue. The stakes feel high, you're afraid of making a mistake, and you stiffen up.
Yeah.
But the dog, who just thinks human is home, is the younger sibling. The stakes are entirely gone, you are relaxed, you are laughing, and ironically, you end up performing much better because the fear of failure is removed.
And that lower stakes environment proves crucial when the lesson tests the learner. The source material includes a mini quiz where the student has to choose between incorrect phrasing like, I free time like football, and the correct, in my free time I like playing football.
Right.
Because the listener is anchored by the comedy of the pets, They aren't sweating with test anxiety.
Hmm.
The lesson reinforces this by telling the student, today you didn't learn new English. You used the English you already know.
Which is such a brilliant psychological trick. Framing the quiz as simply using the English you already know reframes the challenge entirely.
It really does.
You go from acquiring something alien to simply accessing a tool you already possess. The source calls this realization powerful, and it absolutely is. It builds immense confidence.
And once that baseline confidence is established, the lesson moves away from isolated phrases and semantic folders. It forces the listener to apply the vocabulary by following a continuous narrative called Sonny the Hero Dog.
This feels like a massive shift in cognitive demand. Moving from isolated sentences to a flowing narrative requires the listener to track subjects, verbs, and timelines all at the same time.
It's a big step up.
Yeah. And Kevin sets the scene of this story beautifully. The sky is blue, the sun is warm. He tells Sonny, let's go outside. Sonny jumps and barks, which Kevin clarifies means yes.
Right.
They head to the park. Sonny runs left and right, smelling everything. Kevin walks slowly, relaxing, actively thinking that free time is wonderful.
Which is where we see the direct application of the philosophical groundwork laid earlier. Kevin is embodying the stress-free rest they discussed.
Right, he's totally relaxed.
The environment is safe. But then, the narrative structure deliberately disrupts this piece. Sonny stops. He gets very serious. He looks at the ground and refuses to move.
Kevin asks what's wrong, but gets no answer. Sonny sniffs something, looks at Kevin, looks at the ground, and when Kevin gets closer, he sees something shiny, small silver keys. Sonny wags his tail.
Now, the vocabulary breakdown at the end of the source text highlights very specific linguistic choices used in this scene. Action verbs like bark, sniff, sigh, pat, wag.
All very sensory.
Exactly. And descriptive words like worried, serious, shiny, silver. The lesson is using a narrative matrix to hold these concepts together.
So a story like this functions a lot like a string for the beads of vocabulary.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Well, think about it. If you hand someone a pile of loose beads, just isolated words like sniff, shiny, silver, ground, they scatter. The learner struggles to keep track of them because they lack context.
Right.
But when you string those beads onto a mystery about a dog finding lost keys in a park, the learner can wear it like a necklace. The words lock into place because they are dependent on one another to resolve the tension.
That's exactly it, because the cognitive load of memorizing a list is exceptionally high. But the cognitive load of following a story is remarkably low because human brains are evolutionarily wired for narrative.
We just love stories.
We do. The story introduces emotional stakes. The contrast between the perfect day and Sonny suddenly becoming very serious demands the listener's attention. The tension is the string that keeps the vocabulary beads from scattering.
And I want to look closely at how the lesson builds that tension, because it avoids complex grammar entirely. Instead of teaching advanced adverbs like cautiously or hesitantly, the source text relies heavily on repetition of simple modifiers. Walking very slowly, feeling very happy.
And the source text explicitly identifies this pattern as a natural English expression. It is a deliberate technique to reinforce the intensity of a moment.
Interesting.
By repeating very slowly, the lesson empowers the learner to tell a highly compelling, suspenseful story using the rudimentary tools they already possess. They do not need a massive vocabulary to create atmosphere.
You really do feel the suspense when Kevin and Sonny are standing in the empty park. You know, just the wind, no people, no bags. Kevin tells Sonny, someone lost these. The narrative forces you to eagerly anticipate the next vocabulary word just to see how the mystery resolves.
And the resolution of the lost keys mystery does something fascinating. It evolved the entire philosophy of the lesson.
Okay, how so?
Well, Sonny gets an idea. He walks slowly past a tree to a bench where a worried old man is checking his pockets and sighing.
Sonny approaches gently, and then Kevin holds up the keys and uses a deeply practical, embedded phrase. Excuse me, are these yours?
Such a useful phrase for a learner.
Totally. The man is overjoyed. He pats Sonny on the head, calls him a hero. Kevin describes Sonny wagging his tail like a helicopter, which is an incredibly vivid visual for a learner.
It really is.
Kevin and Sonny walk home, both very happy. And Kevin concludes the story by reflecting that free time isn't just for relaxing. It's also for kindness and sometimes for helping someone.
The lesson pivots from internal self-care to external community action.
Which feels like a massive contradiction in the source text, honestly. I mean, we spent the first half of this deep dive breaking down how brilliant the lesson was for claiming free time is just about sleeping, doing nothing, and being happy.
Right, the no-pressure approach.
It was all about removing pressure. But now, at the climax, it tells the learner they have to be heroes and track down strangers to return lost property. Does the lesson want us to rest, or does it want us to save the world?
Well, it is an evolution of agency, not a contradiction. The lesson must begin by removing the obligation of productivity to lower the effective filter we talked about.
Right.
It validates rest, because when you are burned out by the pressure of daily life, you are in survival mode. You lack the cognitive and emotional capacity to notice anything outside of your immediate fatigue.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you are so stressed about your own life that you wouldn't even notice the keys on the ground, let alone the worried man on the bench.
Exactly. Once you are rested, once you have taken that self-care like Kevin enjoying a slow walk, you regain your capacity to observe the world. The true definition of free time in this Spry English lesson is the freedom to choose your focus.
The freedom is the central point. When your battery is depleted, your focus has to be internal self-care, like a nap. But when your battery is charged, that freedom creates the space for spontaneous empathy.
Yes. You aren't returning the keys because it's a mandatory study requirement or a job. You do it because you have the time and the emotional capacity to be kind.
That's beautiful.
It is. The lesson seamlessly transitions the learner from passive resting to active, joyful participation in the community.
It really takes you on a complete philosophical journey.
It does. And it makes you think about the very first things you were taught when you learned a new subject, a new language, or even when you started a new job.
Oh, that's a good point.
If the foundational sentences you learn to construct are about kindness, about observation, about the simple joy of a warm sun, or helping a stranger in a park, how does that subtly shape the kind of thinker and speaker you become?
Wow.
Does the vocabulary we prioritize learning actually dictate the kind of world we are preparing to interact with?
If your initial vocabulary is entirely based on business and transactions, you are trained to see the world as a marketplace.
Exactly.
But if your foundational vocabulary is built on walks in the park, wagging tails, and returning lost keys, well, you are trained to see a community. It really is like trying on a new pair of glasses. You just have to decide what you want to focus on.